All right, thanks. So thanks for all of those of you who are attending today. I was saying earlier, there's people from all over places that we haven't really interacted with or done trainings at before. So I appreciate that. You know, when we first scheduled this, we were a little surprised at how quickly a large number of people signed up for it. But thinking about it more, it's not that surprising. This is very popular material and very popular content. It's for the trainings that we do, this is the one that everybody is signing up for and asking us about. When we post on social media, this is the content that gets all the attention. And David had been mentioning earlier that we see other trainers out there, posting photographs of their activity, and we see in the background there's the Kanban maturity model posters, and so the amount of enthusiasm for this is very apparent, and that's really nice. And it makes sense because what this is. This isn't a new idea that some smart people came up with to try to explain stuff. This is actually some smart people. But a lot of us, all of us, Kanban coaches who meet periodically, at least twice a year in these leadership retreats, had reviewed, the last 10 years of what this 100 or so coaches have been doing, engaging with clients, teaching the material, trying to better understand and explain the material for a long time. And we reviewed that empirical experience and then codified it. We've organized what we know. And so it's really a new understanding of some of the foundational practices and then a lot of the advanced practices that are, in our fundamental trainings, Kanban system design, Kanban management professional program, and beyond. And we've just organized that. And we realized that, the experience, meaning, the time on site with clients, working with them, could be translated into essentially a playbook that democratizes what a Kanban coach is able to do and makes it trainable and learnable and repeatable. And so that's been very exciting for us. So just quickly about us, I'm Steve McGee on that's my voice. I work with David now. I've been involved with Kanban University and the Kanban method. Actually, I saw a keynote speech and got hooked, and pretty much haven't gone back since then. But now I'm working directly with David for the School of Management, and obviously David's here too. That's his photo on the bottom there. And just a bit about the School of Management. David's been doing consulting and now much more so training for a number of years. And what we found is the most effective way to get results that last a long time. They stick. They can evolve, they can improve on the results instead of atrophy and backslide. It's more effective to train managers, train the people who work in the company, than to just outsource it to somebody else who will try to do it for you. And so that's why we identify as a school of management, and that's what we teach is management skills, management practices, to help people get results and know that they're getting results and make the right choices. It's not theoretical, it's very pragmatic, actionable, evidence-based guidance. And anyway, so that's who we are. You can see also in the slide, there's photographs of some materials. And I'll be talking about our materials at the end of this presentation in our trainings. But here's our agenda. So David will be talking about the purpose of the maturity model, why we have it, how it came to be. Then we'll go into a brief overview summary of the model, and then dive deeper into how it works, how coaches and managers can use it, how you can avoid resistance to implementation, how you can motivate people to be interested or willing to take actions that will make a difference, and how this has reframed the Kanban coaching professional, the KCP credential, and how that works now. And then we'll go through where you can get more information about how to implement this stuff, and then we'd like to open for questions. So David, If you are a KMP, you definitely have seen this before. But David can talk about um, the purpose behind the model and where it came from and the context that it came to be. All right, so yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, so this graph really explains the traditional problem. It's the traditional change management J curve, that we have some existing capability. It's not good enough, and we'd like it to be better. We see the representation of better towards the right-hand side of the picture. And to get better, we decide that we have to change our processes, our ways of working. And inevitably, when we start that change, actually things get worse. So we see this drop off, and there'll be some ups and downs. And what we hope is that gradually the changes take effect and things improve. And if it all goes well, we achieve the objective, the new level of performance, the greater capability. Wonderful. However, the reality is that the big J-curve, dramatic social changes, revolutionary change, they tend to be problematic in organizations. So we see here that you try to go too far too soon. It stresses the organization greatly. There's a big drop in the performance and capability, and that's representative of the overreaching. And then, of course, it takes some time before things get better, and therefore there's a deficit that the whole area below the x-axis there, that's the deficit, the pain that we're paying for the change, and that will need capital. It will need managerial tolerance and patience. And the drop, how far we dropped, may impact our customer experience, trust in our brand, and so forth. And as a consequence, these very large changes, they have a high failure rate. That at some point during the big dip, management panics, they lose their cool, and they abort the change. If they're lucky, they can roll back to the old way of doing it. Often that's not the case, and they start to make yet another change, and they can get into a spiral of dip, continued dipping. And the Kanban method's always been about the antidote to this problem. It's been a whole different way of doing change. It's an evolutionary approach to change. And the whole idea is, rather than one big designed, managed, revolutionary change with a big J, it's lots of incremental small changes, a start with what you do now approach. Steve, could you move the slides? Steve, are you still there?
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. You want to advance to the next?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Back to the yeah. The J curve.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah. Okay,
Right.
I guess
So
I just
it's lots of.
Yeah.
So we have lots of little small incremental changes, And that's the concept of the Kanban method. But there's really two failure modes that we have recognized with Kanban. The first one, which we see a lot more because we deal with consultants and coaches and other trainers, is they try to be too smart. They try to show off too much knowledge, and they try to take the organization too far in a single move. They're overreaching. And the second problem, which is much more common in the market, where they haven't been involved with properly trained Kanban professionals, is simply they've stuck a few post-it notes on the wall, and they think they're doing Kanban already, so that was great. They like it, it worked for them. But what's next? They think that they've done Kanban, they should do something else. And we refer to that as the false summit plateau problem. So the maturity model, it exists really for two main reasons. We want consistency of implementations. If you engage with a Kanban coaching professional, we want them giving you consistent advice, and we want the credential of Kanban coaching professional to mean something, to mean something trustworthy. And the Kanban maturity model is there to provide appropriate guidance based on your current level of organizational maturity, your organizational resilience, your ability to cope with stress, your ability to manage risk, your ability to maintain your cool and your discipline when things are going wrong. And Kanban coaching professionals are trained to be able to recognize that and then to apply appropriate Kanban practices. So it's about appropriateness. It's about finding the right level of Kanban implementation to map what you're doing now, and to avoid these two common failure modes, that not going far enough, not stressing your organization so that things don't get better. You need a little bit of stress. At the core of what we're doing, it's a sports coaching model, and the Kanban maturity model is the playbook. So sports coaches will tell you they need to push people out of their comfort zone. They need to make them feel a little uncomfortable, a little stressed, and that will provoke them to get better. And then they have the playbook of advice and guidance, suitable practices that will enable them to make a step to the next level of performance. And that's exactly what the Kanban maturity model does. It provides a map of over 150 practices that coaches can recommend. It eliminates these two failure modes of overreaching and not pushing hard enough. And it provides a consistency. It's a consistent playbook. So if you engage with a Kanban coaching professional, the quality of service you get from them comes with some trusted level of understanding. Back to Steve.
Thanks, David. Absolutely. One of the things that I always take away from this slide is that from the beginning, the Kanban method and everything that's built on that has been designed to be a low disruption change, low risk change, and that's hard. Change is hard. So that's one of the benefits of this playbook, is to give guidance for how to get started and how to continue forward. So let's take a quick look at a summary of the maturity model. Now, you've probably seen different versions of fidelity of the model, meaning there's different posters with different views of this very complex, holistic model. And so here's a very simple view. And we're looking at it, you can see there's 3 columns. There's the middle, the right, and the left. If we start with the middle, those are the levels, and they're defined by the kind of results that you can achieve is what defines a maturity level. It's not the level of the Kanban practice sophistication. the definition of the level is the results or the outcomes that you can get. And I like looking at these titles like oblivious, risk hedged in terms of management. So like at level 0, we could say, and we can see, the people seem to be oblivious to the needs or oblivious to the value of management. They haven't recognized that some management is going to help. Whereas level 1, the management system can help a team do its job. Level 2, the management system is such that a lot of people can be aligned to try to meet the needs as they understand it from a customer perspective. And the further into the model, or further deeper into maturity you go, the more sophisticated the management system can be to get much greater and lower risk results. On the right side, there's the culture, and culture can be vague, but we get pretty specific when we're talking about it. And it includes values, and we'll look at the values specifically in a little bit. But as you can see, just looking at this list, these summaries, the deeper you go, you see less self-centeredness and more attention to others, like people you work with, other departments that you're connected to, and more attention towards the customer, towards the purpose of why are you in business, a greater focus on the ideals, what makes the industry or the business you're in best, and then even focus on the future. So it's just the maturity of the type of focus people can have deepens with the different levels. And on the left side, this is essentially the scope of the practices. So if we're thinking in terms of practices at lower maturity levels, if you apply some of these practices, let's say at level 0, it'll help you finish a task. Whereas, level 1, the practices are what they can do is help a team of people deliver, what work they're supposed to do. It will help them get that done. Practices at level 3, at level 4, it's scaling the impact and the scaling the interconnectedness of the different networks in the organization to achieve predictable results, to the point where at the deeper levels, which really is, those are enterprise services planning practices at level 5 and 6. You can see that there's a significant color change there. We don't really tend to get into that. It's quite advanced material, and the thing I want to say about that is from level 0 to level 6, it's not appropriate, it's overreaching to skip levels. And that's one of the problems that David was talking about in the previous section is, people, they may have some good teams, some strong teams, have good leadership in the teams. They've defined a way of working that's very effective for that. And then they want to have flawless delivery cadences of large projects at a profit. And so they learn practices that we would recognize as level 4 or even level 5 practices. And they try implementing them, and they actually cause more problems. So this model is meant to find what is your maturity level, and then start trying to implement practices at the next level. As David was mentioning, stress enough to drive improvement, but not overstress so you get injured. Here's another view. It's the same model, but another view with more fidelity. Same 3 columns essentially. What we can see here, it's the maturity levels, and those are labeled. And then on the right side, it's the culture, and on the left side are the practices. So starting with the culture, there's the values column, and you can see there's a list of values there. If you're familiar with the book from Mike Burrows, Kanban from the Inside, where originally the nine values were listed, those have been expanded, and we've gotten more specific about those, and that's what you see here. So some of the original 9 you can see directly, but otherwise they've been expanded. And the way I like to define what is a value, that can be vague as well, but we like to get very specific. A value is, the way I put it, is it's something that people would say it matters. They think it's important. They think it helps. So, for example, at level 1, there's collaboration, taking initiative, transparency. People, in this case, you could say they think transparency matters. They would say it's better if we're transparent. When we're transparent, it helps us. Maybe it helps everybody, but definitely it's helping us to be transparent. I'm sure most of the people on this call would think, of course, but go outside the agile world, go outside other industries, and it's very common for people to think the last thing I want to do is tell my boss or tell other people what's happening. You hide it from them, or there's just going to be more trouble. So unless people actually agree, they get to the point where they understand and they're convinced that yes, transparency is better, it's a better way, they're probably not going to be interested in implementing a practice that would increase transparency. So in that way, the values are prerequisite to that level of maturity. It's very difficult to get results out of a team if you're not willing to collaborate, if you're not willing to be transparent so that other people can help you, and if you're not willing to take initiative when you see a problem and do something about it. Likewise with, let's say if we look at level 4 risk hedge, if you're not interested in regulatory compliance, that's the last value on that list for risk hedge. If you don't think regulations and you don't think stakeholders matter, you're going to get kicked out of London, like Uber was kicked out of London because they were breaking taxi laws and city laws. It's pretty high risk to suddenly lose a market suddenly by government action. So to get the kind of results associated with these maturity levels, you need to hold those values. And if you're a leader, you need to put your effort into making sure people understand and agree and care about these values. That's leadership's job. So we look at the left side for the practices. The terms here are really describing the character or the qualities of the practices at the different levels. So like at lower levels, level 1, level 2, that's the practices there. They're going to be more tactical. There might be less alignment. If one team and another team are using team Kanban boards, there may not be a connection between the two of them. Also, it's going to be more reactionary. Simple way for Kanban folks to think about reactionary is if you only have a few columns, you don't know what's coming before your columns. So anything that shows up in your backlog or in your next column or your pool of options might be a surprise. Where deeper maturity, you could be more anticipatory. So you could see further upstream, for example. You might be able to see up higher levels and layers of the organizational hierarchy. The practices are more operationally managed, meaning multiple departments in concert are all aligned, and decisions can be made that optimize the whole and not locally. And of course, at the deepest level, much more strategic, congruent, the practices at that point. And so that's a very another brief view. This is a good resource or asset to share with managers or other people in the company. It doesn't get into as much Kanban jargon, and that won't confuse people with practice names that they aren't familiar with. And it talks about what's the benefit? What is the benefit of the Kanban method? What is the benefit of deeper maturity? So I'd encourage you all to get a hold of this. I'll show you links at the end of this presentation for where you can find it. So David talked about the Kanban method, the Kanban maturity model, addressing 2 points, pain points, the plateau and the overreach. And the point he made was to avoid overreaching, being the smartest guy in the room, being the process geek, that's a risk. That's actually potentially it's a weakness. And on the other hand, the unwillingness or the hesitation to push people or to bring people out of their comfort zone, that's also another risk. So our training is designed, and this model is designed to guide somebody to get the right balance of not going too far, but not far enough. And so let's take a look at an example of how the maturity model works in action. If you've been exposed to Kanban, you've probably seen this cartoon at some point. If not, this is a book. Please go ahead and buy it as soon as you can, or borrow it from somebody. This has been a bestseller for a long time, so there's a lot of copies out there. But what are we seeing in this poster here, or in this cartoon? Well, really what we're seeing is a cartoon that was written 10 years ago for the cover of the Kanban method book. And with the maturity model now, we can look back at it and get more wisdom, we can get more insight from from this cartoon based on the model as we understand it today. And I have a couple questions. These are rhetorical because we're not all in dialogue. But do people look happy? No. And what's the problem? What's the problem here? Some people are saying what the problem is. But let's say you're a customer. Do you have faith you're going to get your request done? Or let's say you're a manager. Do you think you're spending your money properly? Would you be comfortable reporting on the status of this team in management review? In that context, I'd say the problem is they're not delivering. Delivery is inconsistent. You can see some work in UAT. I don't know how much work has finished that, but clearly work isn't getting done. The inbox is piling up faster than the outbox. So given that, let's use the model to try to understand. So how would we address that? What's our guidance? Here is another view of the maturity model. This is the poster for the coach. If you are a practitioner who understands the maturity model and the Kanban method, this poster is for you. It's also free to download, and we'll cover that. But let's quickly go through how this is organized. You already know there's the rows. Those you know. You can see the titles on the side. Oblivious, team focused. Yes, that's level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3. And then there's columns. That's the blue boxes across the top. Visualize, limited whip. You can see general practices. If you're familiar with the Kanban method, there's 6 general practices. Visualize, limit whip, marshal options, manage flow, explicit policies, implementing feedback loops, and improving and evolving. So in that matrix, in the boxes are the enumerated 150 plus specific practices that David mentioned. So for example, if you're going to visualize, there are lots of ways to visualize something. Some of them are much more sophisticated than others. You can see deeper into the model and shallower into the model. That's the level of sophistication of the practices appropriate for the capability and the culture of the organization at their maturity level. That's how that works. But there's an element to this that may not be so obvious. And on each of the rows is split, and there's a transition and a consolidation row. And so I'll briefly describe what this is, and then we'll go through an example. Transitioning practices are different, or we've separated them from the consolidating practices. And the qualities of the nature of a transitioning practice is it's simpler, it's easier to use. It's also, it may not necessarily get you a solution. It may not fix a problem. But what it definitely does, at its minimum, is it will show you what the problems are very clearly. You implement these practices, you'll have a group of people recognizing this is a problem. That's what transitioning practices do. So consolidating practices are generally, they're harder to implement. They may require, for example, switching a vendor from Jira to Swift Kanban, for example. It may involve managers changing the way they do their job. It may change, instead of caring about this metric, now we care about that metric. These are harder to implement. There's going to be more resistance. And so, but they will get a result. They change outcomes. So that's the difference between transitioning and consolidating practices. And I know you can't read that poster because it's meant to be very, very large, printed on the wall. But let's take a quick look, or a deeper look, into some of the practices. Now, I've marked up on the right side maturity level 1 transitioning, maturity level 2 consolidating, or one consolidating, and then maturity level 2 transitioning again. And the colors are also reflecting that. And each of these rows is a level. And each of the columns, you see these practices. And they're numbered, so they're easy to reference. The book is a reference to define what each of these practices are in more detail. But thinking back to that cartoon, 4 people standing in front of a board, people were making some comments, and you could see what it looked like on the board. What practices were in place? What practices did we observe? What was happening in that company or in that team? Well, I would definitely say they were having a Kanban meeting. They were standing in front of the board and they were talking about the work. They're talking about the status. That's a Kanban meeting. And also visualize 1.3, they had a board. They were visualizing the work carried out by team by means of Kanban board. I can't say with confidence that any of these other practices were in place. I don't know. But given, what is their problem? They're having trouble getting work done. They're having trouble delivering. Given that, I'm thinking maybe their maturity level is level 1. They get some work done, but it's unpredictable. It's inconsistent. And looking at the spread, the balance of tickets across the board, it looks to me like their process is probably also not consistent. I would say that looks like a level 1 team at best. And we can see they've started some of the level 1 practices. But let's take a look at, a Kanban meeting, a good Kanban board. What impact does that have? Stand-up meeting, a board, what impact does it have? Well, one guy, Shaggy, it looks like, he's saying, I'm stuck. Somebody's busy, somebody's idle. Is that bad? Is that a failure? I would say no. The person on the right saying, let's do something about it. That's the impact that those practices have. Let's do something about it. Somebody stepping up to take leadership. They don't want to tolerate this anymore. They want to change it. They want to fix it. The problem is too obvious and they want to fix it. That's what the impact is. These are transitioning practices provoking a consolidation, a desire or willingness to try something new. So this is a success. If a coach set this up, if a manager set this up, they've succeeded. This is a win. So after this, so from this moment, this is like the iron is hot, time to strike the hammer. What can we do now? Well, we take this dissatisfaction, somebody stuck, people not getting what they want. We take that satisfaction and we take steps to make an improvement, make a difference. So looking back at the practices available to us, my first place to check is the row that we're in, maturity level 1. What practices are in that maturity level that we haven't implemented fully or that we could do better? If you've been through Kanban systems design as a training, or you're a KMP or a Kanban management professional already, already definitely limit WIP. You want to solve the problems that they have right now, limit WIP. That's the number 1 thing you can do. Part of limiting WIP is the basic policies. If you limit WIP, you're going to be provoked, or you're going to need to start making selection, like what's next. That's replenishment meetings. There may be other policies like let's assign work. Who's working on what? But by completing the rest of the practices in maturity level 1, you can get to the point where you're stable enough and strong enough to start venturing into level 2. And if you look at the bottom right of this table, you can see identify sources of dissatisfaction. I mentioned, this Kanban board and this Kanban meeting has provoked dissatisfaction. People don't feel good anymore. They're not happy. Well, identify sources of dissatisfaction. Again, if you're a Kanban systems design graduate, that's the first question we ask. It's the first action in implementing Kanban, is find what is the problem. If you find problems people care about, they're going to be willing to solve them. That's the Kanban method. And so let's take a more theoretical view of what we're talking about here in a metaphor. And it aligns directly with David's comment that yes, Kanban coaches are much more like a sports coach, not a life coach. There's other ways of coaching. There's other goals of coaching. But I want to ask, what are these people here doing? What are they trying to do? And it's actually quite simple. Both of them are fully aligned on this. That white ball, what they want is this golf ball to go somewhere, go where they want it to go, land where they want it to land, and stop where they want it to stop. That's what they're trying to do. There's an objective measure of success. It's either doing what they want it to do or it's not. They can tell if it's good enough. They can tell if it's getting better. Given that context, like there's an objective measure of better, all of their actions can be validated in terms of does it make an improvement or not. And so, if you're a golfer, maybe you know Tiger Woods, maybe you like Lee Trevino, maybe you don't know anything about golf, but if your problem trying to play golf is you hit the ground instead of the ball, and you see around the ball there's a bunch of grass missing. If you hit the ground instead of the ball, maybe you shouldn't try to figure out how Tiger Woods wins the world championship. Maybe you should focus on what's your immediate problem, hitting the ball and not the ground. But if you are like a champion and you've been a champion for years, and then you suddenly like lost a ball or made a big mistake and you've fallen way behind in a championship, it's the end of the year, you're facing like either making $5 million or not making $5 million, and there's thousands of people in the crowd shouting. You need to calm down. And even though this new up and coming golf player has started to pass you and is beating you now in the tournament, you need to relax and focus on fundamentals and start doing better, get back on track, or you're not going to win. Those are two different levels of maturity. One is at a champion level, the other is not. So a Kanban coach is able to immediately recognize from the start, be able to see how well are we doing and give guidance on doing it better. And then being able to check, are we actually making it better? Not are we swinging the way Tiger Woods swung, not emulating somebody else, but actually getting the results we want to get. Because through this, Kanban maturity model helps coaches and managers make improvements and demonstrate their improvements. And this is actually pretty significant. By identifying, and we learned this in the first class, Kanban system design, by identifying what should be happening, what are we being asked to do, and then being able to know statistically, how well are we doing? And then having tools to improve that from the beginning, we're able to make improvements, and then we are also able to show our work. Was our effort worth it? And so in this way, managers can justify this was worth the investment. We spent this much money on training. We spent this much money on a Kanban coach. What do we have to show for it? The data's there. Because of this, we recognize the Kanban maturity model training and the Kanban coaching professional training that follows it are enough to qualify people for the Kanban coaching professional credential, the KCP. KCP has been around for a long time. But in the past, you would have to have years of experience on the client side to learn this stuff intuitively. And a lot of people did that. We had these 100 pioneers, and they shared their information. They shared this, and we've codified that into this content, this 5 days of training. And as David said, we want to recognize that people who are able to do this, who are able to identify problems and introduce appropriate practices to get results, stop before they're making mistakes and making things worse and getting back on track. We want to recognize them with a credential, and that's what the KCP is all about. So now I want to talk about how you can get this knowledge yourself and implement it. So we have resources and some trainings, but as you can see here, these are the posters that we were looking at and we zoomed into. But where can you find this stuff? We have several different posters, benefits brochure, the KMM model. That's the one that has the practices in it, and it's large format. You can print this on the wall. And then the summary, that's a smaller size, and that's a good thing to bring into a manager's office or bring into a team and explain it to them. You can also download the first chapter of the KMM book. All of that's available on kanbanmaturityModel.com. There's also the BBVA case study. That's a Spanish bank. Both BBVA and Vanguard are both very large institutions that went through Kanban method implementations where their trainers, their coaches were using the Kanban maturity model to get results. And the case studies do an excellent job of explaining what did they do, what happened, and what the eventual outcome was, what the result was. This is also another great thing to print and like stick somewhere in the office where a manager might see it, to get willingness and interest in connecting with you as a KCP. And then of course, there's the Kanban maturity model book. Again, you can find that on the website and the link there. The book is actually somewhat essential in order to read and understand the poster, the A0 poster with the different practices. Some of the practices are obscure and you need a definition of like, what do we mean by that? And beyond that, we also have training, of course, we're a training company. This month, we have online training and the beginning of June starting. That's organized in a way so that a lot of it's the same as the in-person training. It's 5 days worth of material, but the training for online is organized such that there's self-directed and self-paced material that you engage with on your own. And then each day, Monday through Friday, there's a 3-hour live session streaming online. And you can ask direct questions. There's interaction with the other students in the class. Those are scheduled to start at 8 a.m. in California, Seattle, Los Angeles. I think not quite Lima, but it's Pacific Daylight Time. And then of course the East Coast, it's 11. And in Europe, it's at the end of the day. So either first thing in the morning, a long lunch, or after work, a 3-hour session. We are still hoping to do a in-person training at our training center in Bilbao the first week of June, but we'll see about that. You can see our schedule and the details on this link here. And if you register for the live training and it turns out we're not able to do it, there's the you'll be able to also do you can switch to the online training. So one of the things I also want to mention, other than we've structured our calendar or the schedule of the class to be friendly to multiple time zones. We've also are structuring our pricing to be friendly to multiple currencies and multiple economies. So our prices are in euros and in dollars for the North American and the European market. If you are in a region that's not North America or Europe, we do structure our pricing to be appropriate for a more local market. So if you are coming from one of those places, please contact us and ask us about that, and we can give you details on how you can register in a way that's fair for you. So I'd like to invite David to give us some closing thoughts, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry, I was muted. I've been answering questions as we go along.
Great.
Thanks for the presentation, Steve, and keeping it short in the available time. The essence of this has always been to create consistency, and to transfer the skills from a relatively small number of people who regularly attend Kanban conferences, hang out with us quite a lot, have perhaps taken a lot of training, and those people that we now refer to as accredited Kanban consultants. There's in total 130 of them in the world, and there was really a need to scale consistent guidance across the world, across the market, beyond the access that you might have to one of those 130 or so people. The Kanban maturity model and the Kanban coaching practices training, so the model, the posters, the book, all the assets, as well as the training classes, they're designed to create thousands of Kanban coaching professionals, so that many organizations, tens of thousands of organizations out there who are doing relatively shallow, low maturity, typically maturity level 1 Kanban, team level Kanban, they can take it so much further. The rewards for taking it further are significant. Steve hasn't talked about the economic benefits, but typically between a maturity level 1 organization and one that achieves level 4, we're talking about a 32-fold improvement in their productivity and their performance, a drop in their delivery times that exceeds 90%. That it's very reasonable that Kanban done properly allows you to do 10 times more work in 1/10 of the time. And therefore there's a massive economic improvement available if we can only scale good quality Kanban implementation. And our vehicle for doing that, our means of doing it, is to generate a large number of Kanban coaching professionals who are capable of leading their organizations to maturity level 4, and that 10 times more work in 1/10 of the time type of performance improvement. I noticed while I was talking there was a bunch more questions have appeared. So there's a question here. It says, I read the book and I don't see a real difference between levels 3, 4, and 5. All the talk is about risk management. They go a bit further, but to measure my teams is not enough clarity. Can you talk more about the difference? Well, a level 3 organization is one that can satisfy its customers. But the reality is that you could be losing money on every transaction. And unless you're Jeff Bezos and you have access to 19 years of almost unlimited capital to fund those losses, your business will suffer. So the difference between a level 3 organization that can satisfy its customers and a level 4 organization is the level 4 organization can do it in a manner that satisfies all the stakeholders, that it's sustainable, it's profitable, it produces free cash, it meets all the regulatory requirements, and so on. It keeps everything in balance. It doesn't just focus on the customer as a sole stakeholder. And that's actually a significantly harder problem. Delivering satisfaction to one stakeholder or one group of stakeholders is always easier than creating a balance and a fairness across many. That's the difference between levels 3 and 4. The difference between level 4 and 5 may be expressed using a metaphor or an analogy. You could be a competitor in the Olympic Games, and that would make you a great athlete in your chosen field. Our very first manager in the Kanban implementation at Microsoft, Dragos Dimitriou, he was an Olympic athlete. But there's a difference between being in the Olympics and winning the gold medal. And for those who aspire to be the best, to be the market leader, to win the world championship or to lead their industry, that's level 5 performance. So level 4 is being in the show, showing up, maintaining that sustainably, certainly having defensible market share and happy customers, but level 5 is about being the best. The next question is, what does customer fitness criteria mean? That's actually defined in the book Fit for Purpose. It's the concept that your customers are satisfied that first of all, if it's an open market, they select you, they select to do business with you because they believe that you can meet their needs, and their needs, there's often some fundamental things, but they might have some very specific requirements, and they believe that you can meet those needs. And if you do, then they're happy, they're contented, they're satisfied, and what you've done for them is fit for purpose. If, on the other hand, you don't meet their needs and expectations, you're unfit for purpose, and they may choose to switch their business to someone else. Teodoro Borzeva, who's my co-author on the KMM and the Architect, she actually she lives about 3 kilometers out the window in front of me, not the window behind me, the window in front of me. And very close to her apartment, there is a pizza restaurant, and she's learned that she should only order pizzas on the night when the owner is working. Other nights of the week, when the owner is taking some time off, the quality of service is unfit for purpose. There's too much randomness in how long it takes, or whether you get the right ingredients, or whether the pizza is baked properly. So customer fitness criteria are the way that the customer evaluates whether you were good enough or not. I need to scroll down a moment here to see the next question.
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, so it says reading the book KMM is a prerequisite for the KCP class. We don't require people to take the classes in sequence, but the reality is that if you want to become a coach and you haven't read the playbook yet, the coaching advice is a little abstract. And as the KMM is the playbook for the coaches, there is a dependency there. You can't be a Kanban coaching professional without a deep and thorough understanding of the KMM. The next question, does the KMM have practices to evaluate the quality of product or service delivered by a team? In the sense that the customer defines what their expectations are, those practices are defined in the book Fit for Purpose and the Fit for Purpose framework, and those practices are mapped onto the Kanban maturity model. So the answer is yes, but in the generic sense that we teach you how to create your own set of criteria using the Fit for Purpose framework. How to convince organizations that feel Agile failed for them that this will work. I think it's a very good point that more and more organizations have spent a lot of money and wasted a
Yeah.
lot of time um, trying to pursue agile methods. I think the very first slide that I was stumbling over at the beginning because I hadn't seen that version of it before really explains the difference. All agile methods are revolutionary, dramatic social change, represent dramatic social change. They're revolutionary in nature. They're big J-curve impact. And the Kanban method really exists. And I started to create it in 2003. I didn't sit down and say, oh, I'm going to do this thing called Kanban. That was more emergent, and it wasn't until 2007 that we understood it as the Kanban method we have today. But I set out to create an evolutionary, incremental social change approach as an antidote, as a complete alternative path to agility, as an anti-agile method in that sense. So I would start with that explanation, and there's much deeper, richer material on that included in the Kanban Coaching Professional class. Right, so we have one here that says, in Brazil, a place that I get to visit quite often, we have a large market. Do you think it's possible to change the same price practiced by the AKTs in Brazil? Talking about e-learning training. Yeah, this isn't the forum to talk about
Yeah, please
pricing.
contact us directly about that. Really,
Well, actually, Steve, it's a Kanban University question, and I would recommend that you contact Kanban
oh,
University, the
yeah.
info@kanban.university email address. But the thing is that Kanban University does not set a pricing policy. We do allow the trainers the freedom to set the prices in their own market, and we adjust the prices that we charge for the certificates using quite a sophisticated economic formula that calculates purchasing power parity. So we do make adjustments for markets like Brazil, but this is not an appropriate forum for that question. Please address it directly to Kanban University. Is it possible to make an assessment of how the current level of maturity? Yes, absolutely. While we're still developing a formal appraisal method that's turning out to be quite challenging, we do teach you a key goal of the Kanban maturity class is that you should leave the class after 3 days with the capability to make an assessment of the organization and establish the level it's at. The playbook is useless as a coaching tool if you're not capable of making that assessment in the first place. The next question says, I've read the BBVA case study. Do you have more examples? Yes, so there's now the Vanguard case study, and I believe that we have a couple more, if not published, literally just days away from publishing. We have one from Robert Bosch, for example, which is coming very soon. So the watch the kanbanmaturitymodel.com website for the release of, or Kanban University website for the release of new case studies. There are more in the pipe. I'm sure you appreciate that it takes a long time to develop the evidence for a case study, and that writing them is actually a non-trivial challenge. There's a question about, do we have some training in Spanish in Latin America? We have offered the KMM training in Latin America, in fact, very recently in Brazil and Peru. And it's also been offered in Spanish in Peru with Teodoro Bozeva as the trainer. We are looking to offer more in the Spanish language. We're in the process of of recruiting some Kanban specialists who are native Spanish speakers. But as I'm sure you're aware, there's a global crisis happening at the moment, and it has delayed some of our recruitment processes and visa applications and that type of thing. But we're very committed to Spanish and Portuguese language content and training, and enabling Spanish and Portuguese trainers to offer the KMM and the KCP training. There's a how does the KMM change business agility question. Ultimately, where the KMM drives is the concept of a service-oriented organization, and the idea that you achieve business agility by quickly orchestrating sets of services. And for every service, there's a Kanban implementation, whether that's a personal Kanban, a team Kanban, a workflow Kanban, and so on. So it's a very powerful way to achieve business agility. I'm not sure how it changes business agility, because I don't really know what the definition of business agility is, other than an observable outcome. That a business is capable of moving very quickly, very rapidly, and the KMM enables that through this Kanban method is a service-oriented approach. How could this maturity model help with the software development team become more productive? The whole concept that you take out delay, you go faster, you manage dependencies across different services, different Kanban boards. The Kanban method, there's lots of evidence to suggest that it enables you to go 10 times faster and produce 10 times more work. So whether that's software development, or whether you work in an advertising agency, or as a geologist for an oil company, or as a civil engineer or an architect, the productivity improves dramatically. Next, have you got some experience where KMM implementation failed? And so I think there's a general observation about evolutionary change. Evolutionary change is always riddled with setbacks, with small failures, and many different attempts to achieve. So a true evolutionary change story always has setbacks, it always has lots of small failures. But really the KMM is designed to mitigate the probability of failures, the main failure modes with Kanban implementations. And the introduction of the KMM was scaled over a 3 to 4 year period with a small number of companies, and gradually more people in a beta program, and then a small number of trainers and consultants around the world. And we have explored what works and what doesn't work. And there are some other questions during the session about why have, for example, the names of things changed. Well, we've changed things because we learned, and I'm sure that we'll continue to learn, and the KMM will continue to evolve. But the release coming in the next month, the 1.2 release, and since 1.0 a year ago, it's been very stable in comparison to the early community preview version from 2 years earlier. Have you got some experience where KMM? Yeah, so saw that one again. Why does it keep scrolling? Which are the Kanban tools we can do?
Let's make this the last question.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's find out what's the best one. Which are the Kanban tools we can use to implement the method successfully? By that, I think you mean software. The software we recommend are either Swift Kanban or Kanbanize. There are one or two other ones, but those are the main ones. There are also metric tools and plugins, and the main one of those that we recommend is Nave. Next, I've had plenty of success bedding in Kanban with IT delivery teams, but I found it challenging to convince people outside of IT to believe in embracing Kanban, especially further upstream and relating to the funnel of work. How much does the KMM help with this? There's still a lot of work to do on codifying upstream or discovery Kanban or Kanban for innovation or whatever you might call it. We have a new training class in development, which hopefully we'll announce in about a month from now. There are some upstream Kanban practices mapped onto the latest release of the KMM. So the KMM supports that upstream and discovery effort. And otherwise, I don't know what to suggest. I think you always start with what problem are you trying to solve. You know, we're not in the religious conversion business. We're not the Mormons. So if people have a problem to solve in an innovation process, like say drug discovery, then we have to look at that and then look at practices in Kanban and ask ourselves, will that help? Will limiting WIP help? Will relief from overburdening help? And so on. Will visualization help? Will the type of feedback mechanisms that we have in the Kanban method, will they help? And if the answer is yes, well, why are people resisting? And if the answer is no, well, that's great too, right? Kanban's not the right choice for them, but it always starts with the root cause of the problem. What problem are you trying to solve? We're not trying to drive Kanban adoption for the sake of it. And I'm seeing comments, but the other ones are not really questions. We've got this last one here maybe. Is there a planned publishing date for the updated KMM book? It's not finished yet. When it is finished about 6 weeks later, we're still hopeful that that will be sometime in May or early June. We're hopeful that by the Enterprise Agility Conference in June, we will have the new book.
Yeah, let's end the webinar here. It's actually great to see this long list of questions. If any of your questions weren't asked, please contact us. You can see our addresses right here. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. But definitely reach out to us. We do engage with people, and it's important to us that people learn this and start using it and succeed with it. We want there to be a lot more KCPs out there, and that's one of the reasons we've fast-tracked the implementation of this training to the market, and we're promoting it the way we are. But yeah, thank you for joining this webinar and participating. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to either one of us or contact us at info@djaa.com. And hopefully we'll see you at a conference when we're allowed to do that kind of thing, or online on a training. And you know, we wish you success with the Kanban method. David? Oh. Okay, yes, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Bye.